You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everyone, and thanks for keeping it Locked On Wildcats. I am your host, Mike Luke. We're in the NFL draft season right now, so we're having some fun with the NFL draft. Why not? Now, again, Arizona's not Miami. They're not, they're not Miami. They're not USC. Not schools like that produced it, just a conglomeration of Hall of Fame football players. But Arizona's done a pretty nice job of putting some guys in the NFL and some pretty solid players at that. So we're running down, came up with a list of about 8. Let's rehash first. Rob Gronkowski. Not a lot needs to be said about Rob Gronkowski. He would be an all-timer at any school on the proverbial Mount Rushmore, most likely. You can make the case that he is the best tight end in NFL history, and if he's not, he's certainly on that short list. No doubt, first ballot Hall of Famer. Then you got Lance Briggs. A lot of people might say, well, what about Teddy Brewski? Well, here's the difference. Lance Briggs was a more dominant football player. Sure, he doesn't have the Super Bowl rings, but he was a guy that was always one of the best linebackers in the NFL, multiple-time All-Pro, 7-time Pro Bowler. It doesn't really get much better than that when you look at guys who, have come through here outside of Rob Gronkowski. So that's certainly a guy that I feel very comfortable putting there. Teddy Brewski at number 3. What more can you say? One of the handful of greatest Wildcats ever in college, in that he left the NCAA as the all-time sack leader. Hint, that's really good. And then goes off to be one of the catalysts for a team that won 3 Super Bowls. And when he left, I think you could tell that he was going to be good, or that he was going to be an NFL player, but I don't think that anybody saw the kind of impact that he had just because he was an undersized D-end. Then we talked about our guy, Glenn Parker. Glenn Parker comes into Arizona as a junior college guy, late to football, but came around pretty quickly to everything right there, and ended up starting in 5 Super Bowls. So there's your top 4. All right, now let's go number 5. The best player that I've had the privilege of watching at the U of A, where I was actually cognizant of what I was watching, was Chris McAlister. I was of age by that point, and you could just tell that when Chris Mack came in, our good pal Anthony Gimino always talks about how he came into Camp Cochise and he just looked a little bit different. And looked, to put it mildly, he took away half the field, and I know Antoine Winfield won the Jim Thorpe Award. It should have been Chris McAlister. He had one slip up, pardon the pun, against Danny Farmer against UCLA, but he was the most dominating defensive back. And I think it's Dwayne Akina, who obviously has a lot of sway in NFL communities, has coached about as many defensive backs as you can think that have gone on to play in the league. And Dwayne Akina said that Chris McAlister is the one that he measures everybody against. So, that's pretty high praise right there. Went on to win a Super Bowl with the Ravens, was a first-team All-Pro. Career cut a little bit short, but overall, I think if you were to look and say that if that draft was held again, Chris McAlister would still go in the top 10. So not a Hall of Famer, probably had Hall of Famer upside, but didn't obviously quite make that, but certainly the best player I've ever seen at the U of A. Then you got John Fina from Southpointe, a little bit like Glenn Parker in that he was a late bloomer. Kind of funny that they played on the same offensive line for the Buffalo Bills, but comes to U of A, thin guy. I believe he came in as a tight end. And, after a while, he leaves the U of A as a first-round pick, and he plays in the NFL for 10 or 12 years. He's come back to Tucson. He's obviously a staple in the community, a guy, though, that was very much worth that first-round pick. And it's not often that you see a lot of players that have gone on to become guys who were started on multiple Super Bowl teams and were actually, huge parts of that. And John Fina certainly was that. John Fina came in as an undersized player, and this is before Built Bar, but if there was a precursor to Built Bar, John Fina would have consumed it, because John Fina is a strong man. You can tell by watching him. He knows what he's doing. And Built Bar would have been what got him to that point, or the precursor to Built Bar. Built Bar is being utilized by all the best, the strongest athletes. If you see a strong team out there, they're probably using Built Bar. Check it out. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. I'm your host, Mike Luke. All right. So we're breaking down the top 8 U of A NFL players in history, since it is the NFL draft today. And let's go through it again. We got Gronk, we got Briggs, we got Brewski, we got Parker, we got Mcallister, we got Fina. It's a pretty good list right there. A lot of good players. Now, let's talk about the next two. And again, this was difficult. Had to make some hard decisions right here. We're going to go with Darryl Lewis at number 7. D-Lew won the Thorpe Award at the U of A. One of the best defensive backs to come through the conference, honestly. Outside of Chris McAlister, this is probably your best defensive back. And you look at the numbers, 32 career interceptions, made an all-pro team. He's fallen on some difficult times, but Darryl Lewis was the epitome of a long-term NFL starter, and probably a guy that is a little bit overshadowed when you look at players throughout the U of A's history as to what they did in college and then what they did in the pros. D-Lew was that guy. Again, you win the Jim Thorpe Award, you go on to record 32 interceptions in the NFL, and you're an all-pro. You're going to make Mike Luke's top 8 list right there. I'm sure Darryl Lewis feels very, very good about that. But D-Lew, in all seriousness, if you're coming up with an all-time U of A team, it's Chris McAlister on one side and it's Darryl Lewis on the other. So he was that good. A little undersized, but again, that good. All right. Then we're going to go another defensive back here that a lot of people know. Randy Robbins from Casa Grande. One of the first big defensive backs and had a nice long career in the NFL for the Denver Broncos. I mean, another guy, anytime you get 20-plus interceptions, you're going to be on that list. You start for a long time. And he left the U of A. I think there were a few questions about his speed. He certainly answered those. He's obviously, like I said, one of the bigger defensive backs. So a guy that made a lot of was a really, really good football player. And that's kind of the best way you can put it. He would be a starter today. He wasn't quite as dynamic as those other guys, as D-Lew, as Chris McAlister, but he was incredibly solid. And that's pretty much all you can really go for. Again, a really good pick right there. Casa Grande's finest, by the way. All right, let's talk about BetOnline Sportsbook. The NFL draft's going on right now. You want to get on the BetOnline Sportsbook. There's no other place to be. And so you're saying, okay, I think so-and-so is going to be drafted there. Well, if you think so-and-so is going to be drafted where you think they're going to be drafted, then hop on the BetOnline Sportsbook. Make it happen right there. It's easy. Everybody's on it. Hop on. Get like everyone else. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. All right, in summation right here, Arizona's got better pros than I think a lot of people think. Again, it's not Miami. It's not USC. It's not Alabama. But, I mean, and you can keep going on and on down that list. There's some other Edwin Mulatalo, 146 career starts. I mean, you look at that 1998 U of A team. There was, I believe, 18 future NFL players on that. So, again, Rob Gronkowski is the only one that's kind of like really at the apex of his profession, the no doubt first ballot Hall of Famer type. But then after that, you got a lot of different guys right there that were household names in NFL circles for sure. And I think the problem that a lot of people look at now is that there hasn't been an NFL guys in a long time. And I think that's what's kind of frustrating for U of A fans, and that, you don't expect huge names, but you'd like to see some steady flow into the NFL. That obviously didn't happen under Kevin Sumlin, certainly didn't happen under Rich Rod. Mike Stoops was pretty good at it. And actually, Mike Stoops was very good at it. But I think with Jedd Fisch, he's recruiting a higher caliber of player now. And again, we don't know if Jedd Fisch can coach. He certainly has put in the time and the effort. So we're going to find that out. But I would imagine either way, you're going to see a better caliber of NFL player come through the U of A in the coming years, mainly because Jedd Fisch is recruiting a higher caliber of guys. All right, everyone. It was great being with you this week. We will be back with you next week. We'll break down Stanberry Hill, where he was drafted, everything that we could talk about. But thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats.